The night I discovered Lisa's betrayal wasn't a storm of accusations or shattered glass. It was quieter than that, which somehow made it worse. Silence has a way of amplifying the small things. The sound of her laugh, the way her hand lingered too long on someone else's arm, or the click of her phone screen locking when I walked into the room. For weeks, something had been off. Lisa had grown distant, not in a dramatic way, just little shifts that added up. She was always busy, always somewhere else, even when she was sitting right next to me. The conversations we used to have late into the night about everything, and nothing had dwindled to polite exchanges about groceries and bills. Her phone was suddenly an extension of her hand, and her once casual smiles had turned into something secretive. When I asked her if everything was okay, she'd brush it off with a laugh, calling me paranoid. At first, I believed her. We had been married for 10 years, built a life together. I told myself she was stressed, that the spark in long relationships sometimes fades but reignites with effort. I tried to close the gap by planning date nights and being more attentive, but it was like throwing pebbles into a well and hearing nothing but the echo of your own voice. The doubts I tried to suppress came crashing down one ordinary evening. I came home earlier than usual, deciding to surprise Lisa with takeout from her favorite Thai place. I expected her to be in the living room, maybe watching one of her true crime shows or scrolling through her phone like she always did after work. But the house was unusually quiet. I had just set the food down on the counter when I heard it, a low murmur of voices coming from the kitchen. I rounded the corner, and there they were, Lisa and Ryan, my best friend since college. His back was to me, but I could see her face. She was laughing at something he said, her hand resting lightly on his arm. That laugh. It was the one she used to save for me, full of warmth and light. Now it was his to hear, and her touch lingered just long enough to make my stomach churn. Lisa noticed me first. "Adam, you're home early." Her voice was higher than usual, a little too cheerful. She stepped back from Ryan so fast it looked rehearsed, like she'd been caught doing something she shouldn't. Ryan turned, his face a mask of guilt. He opened his mouth to say something, but nothing came out. His inability to meet my eyes told me everything I needed to know. I didn't say much. My heart was pounding in my chest, but my mind was numb. "Hey," I managed, my voice barely above a whisper. I didn't even look at Lisa. I couldn't. Instead, I turned and walked upstairs, shutting the bedroom door behind me. I sank onto the bed, staring at the floor. My thoughts were a whirlwind of questions. How long had this been going on? Was it just an emotional affair, or had it gone further? How could Lisa, the woman I'd promised to love and protect, do this? How could Ryan, the person I'd trusted like a brother, betray me like this? I replayed the scene over and over in my mind, dissecting every detail. The way her hand rested on his arm. The way he stood just a little too close. That guilty look when he turned around. The pieces started falling into place, each one more painful than the last. I thought about the time she'd canceled plans, claiming she had to work late. The times Ryan had been distant, making excuses to skip our usual hangouts. All the moments I'd brushed off now seemed so obvious. How could I have been so blind? The night stretched on, and I didn't sleep. Instead, I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of what I'd lost. My marriage. My best friend. The life I thought I had. By morning, something inside me had shifted. The initial wave of sadness had passed, leaving behind something colder, sharper. I wasn't going to cry, and I wasn't going to scream. That would only give them the satisfaction of knowing how deeply they'd hurt me. No, I had a different plan. If Lisa and Ryan thought they could betray me and walk away unscathed, they were sorely mistaken. I wasn't going to yell. I wasn't going to throw punches. I was going to be methodical, careful. I'd take my time, and when I was done, they'd regret ever thinking they could destroy my life and get away with it. They had taken everything from me. My trust, my happiness, my sense of safety. I was going to take it all back and leave them with nothing. The morning after that gut-wrenching evening, the house was eerily quiet. Lisa hadn't come to bed, and I didn't go looking for her. I didn't want to see her face, not yet. Not when my emotions were still raw, oscillating between heartbreak and anger. I stayed in bed, staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of everything. By mid-morning, the smell of coffee drifted upstairs, but it didn't feel comforting like it used to. Instead, it felt staged, like Lisa was trying to play the part of the perfect wife. It hit me how much of her life lately seemed like an act. The forced laughter. The excuses. The way she tried to downplay everything when confronted. It all felt like pieces of a puzzle I had ignored until now. I got up, pulled on a sweatshirt, and made my way downstairs. Lisa was in the kitchen, her back to me as she poured coffee into her favorite mug. The scene was so normal, so domestic, it almost made me second-guess what I'd seen last night. Almost. "Morning," she said without turning around, her voice even, calm, like she hadn't shattered my world less than 12 hours ago. I didn't reply. I just grabbed a cup and poured my coffee, avoiding eye contact. My silence must have unnerved her because she turned, leaning against the counter with a small, hesitant smile. "You were quiet last night," she said, testing the waters. "Is everything okay?" I stared at her, trying to keep my expression neutral. "You tell me," I said, my voice clipped. The question hung in the air between us, heavy and loaded. Her smile faltered, and for a moment, I thought I saw guilt flash across her face. But she quickly recovered, brushing her hair behind her ear like it was just another day. "Adam, if something's bothering you, we should talk about it." I laughed, a short, bitter sound that even surprised me. "Talk," I said, setting my cup down with more force than I intended. "Yeah, Lisa, let's talk. How long has this been going on?" Her face froze, the color draining from her cheeks. "What are you talking about?" she asked, but her voice wavered, betraying her. "You and Ryan," I said bluntly, watching her reaction like a hawk. "How long?" She blinked rapidly, her hand tightening around the mug. "Adam, that's ridiculous. Ryan is your friend, our friend. There's nothing going on." Her denial was so rehearsed, so smooth, it might have worked if I hadn't seen them with my own eyes. But I had. And no amount of gaslighting was going to make me doubt what I knew. "Don't lie to me, Lisa," I said, my voice cold. "I saw you. Last night." Her mouth opened, then closed, as if she couldn't decide on her next move. Finally, she sighed, setting the mug down on the counter. "Adam, you're overthinking this. Ryan and I are just friends. That's all. Just friends." The words echoed in my head, each one sharper than the last. I could feel my temper rising, but I forced myself to stay calm. Losing control wouldn't help me now. "Friends don't touch each other like that," I said evenly. "Friends don't act like they're sharing a secret the rest of us aren't in on." She crossed her arms defensively, her eyes narrowing. "So now I can't have friends because you're insecure," she shot back. "This is why I didn't want to bring it up. You always overreact." There it was. The shift. She wasn't trying to deny it anymore. She was trying to make this my fault. Classic deflection. But I wasn't taking the bait. "This isn't about me," I said, keeping my voice steady. "It's about you and Ryan and whatever you think you're hiding. You might think I'm blind, Lisa, but I'm not stupid." She stared at me, her jaw tightening, but she didn't say another word. The silence that followed was deafening, and I could feel the tension in the room crackling like a live wire. Finally, she grabbed her mug and walked past me without another glance, heading toward the living room. As I stood there, I realized something important. Lisa wasn't going to admit anything. Not now, maybe not ever. But that didn't matter. I didn't need her confession. I had seen enough, felt enough to know the truth. And the truth was, the woman I married wasn't the woman standing in my kitchen. This wasn't just about betrayal. It was about the lies, the manipulation, the way she twisted the narrative to make me question myself. She wasn't going to come clean, and she wasn't going to apologize. But that was fine. I didn't need her words. I needed a plan. I took my coffee and sat down at the dining table, my mind racing. If Lisa thought she could keep up this charade, she had no idea who she was dealing with. I wasn't going to shout or plead or beg. I wasn't going to let her know how much she had hurt me. Instead, I was going to take my time, learn everything I could about her and Ryan, and use it against them. Not just to expose them, but to dismantle the carefully crafted lives they thought they had. They wanted to betray me? Fine. But they'd learn soon enough that betrayal has consequences. After that tense morning, Lisa avoided me as much as I avoided her. The silence between us was palpable, stretching through the house like an uninvited guest. She went about her days as if nothing had changed, keeping herself busy with errands and phone calls. I knew she was trying to maintain an air of normalcy, but I could see the cracks forming. Her movements were too deliberate, her smiles too forced. She was holding her breath, waiting for me to lash out or confront her again. But I didn't. Instead, I observed. I watched the way her phone never left her side now, how she'd step out of the room to take certain calls or glance at the screen with a flicker of something. Anxiety, guilt, or excitement. I couldn't tell which, and honestly, it didn't matter. What mattered was the pattern. The details. The things she thought I wasn't paying attention to. Ryan, for his part, seemed to have disappeared. Normally, he'd drop by the house or text me about catching a game, but now there was radio silence. It was as if he'd decided that vanishing would somehow erase his involvement. It was a foolish move. If anything, his absence made it all the more obvious that there was something to hide. For days, I kept to myself, pretending to be immersed in work. I needed space to think, to plan. If I acted too quickly, I'd lose the upper hand. I couldn't just accuse them and expect the truth to tumble out. People like Lisa and Ryan didn't operate that way. They were careful, calculating, and skilled at weaving lies into half-truths. No, I needed to be smarter than them. The first step was gathering evidence. If I was going to confront them, or better yet, dismantle their little fantasy, I needed proof. Not for Lisa, not even for Ryan, but for myself. I needed to see the full scope of their betrayal laid bare. It started small. I checked our shared accounts, looking for anything unusual. Lisa had always been in charge of most of the finances, but I knew enough to spot discrepancies. Sure enough, there were charges that didn't make sense. Restaurant bills in parts of town we rarely visited, a hotel booking under her name that coincided with one of her supposed work trips. It wasn't much, but it was enough to confirm my suspicions. Then came the social media accounts. Lisa wasn't overly active online, but her patterns had changed in subtle ways. Posts that were once about us, our home, our dog, were now more generic. Photos of scenery, inspirational quotes, or nothing at all. Ryan's accounts told a similar story. The man who once shared every mundane detail of his life was suddenly quiet, his timeline filled with vague updates that hinted at personal growth or overcoming challenges. It was almost laughable. What really sealed it was the phone records. I had always trusted Lisa enough to respect her privacy, but trust wasn't an option anymore. Using the log from our shared phone plan, I combed through her call history. Ryan's number appeared more times than I could count, often late at night or during the hours she claimed to be at work. The weight of what I found hit me like a freight train. The woman I had spent over a decade with had been lying to my face, building a separate life right under my nose. And Ryan, the friend who had stood by me through college, who had been the best man at my wedding, was her co-conspirator. It wasn't just betrayal. It was a deliberate, calculated effort to erase me from my own life. Still, I didn't let the anger consume me. There would be time for that later. For now, I had to keep my emotions in check and focus on the next step. Knowing wasn't enough. I needed to turn this knowledge into leverage. I started taking notes, cataloging everything I discovered. Dates, times, locations. I saved screenshots, printed statements, and compiled every piece of evidence into a folder that I kept hidden in my office. It became my armor, a reminder that I wasn't powerless in this situation. Every time doubt crept in, every time I thought about confronting Lisa and ending the charade, I looked at that folder and reminded myself that patience was my greatest weapon. As the days turned into weeks, I began to see them differently. Lisa and Ryan weren't the people I thought they were. Not even close. The betrayal had stripped them of their humanity in my eyes. They were no longer my wife and my best friend. They were obstacles, problems that needed to be solved. And I was determined to solve them in a way they would never forget. But even as I prepared for the confrontation, I couldn't help but reflect on how we'd gotten here. There was a time when Lisa and I were happy, when Ryan and I were inseparable. What had gone wrong? Had the cracks always been there, hidden beneath the surface, or had they grown slowly over time, unnoticed until it was too late? I pushed those thoughts aside. This wasn't the time for introspection. Whatever the reasons, whatever the history, it didn't change what they had done. The life I thought I had was gone, and there was no getting it back. What I could do, though, was ensure that they didn't get to walk away unscathed. They thought they could betray me and move on as if nothing had happened. They were wrong. By the time I was done, they would wish they had never met me. Adam knew that revenge needed patience and precision. Confronting Lisa and Ryan outright would be messy, giving them room to deny and deflect. Instead, he decided to let them dig their own graves. He would simply hand them the shovel. Over the next few weeks, Adam worked tirelessly to set his plan in motion. He reached out to Sophie, an old friend from his professional network who shared his disdain for manipulative people like Lisa and Ryan. Sophie had experience in event management and a wide range of connections in the corporate and charity worlds. She immediately agreed to help when Adam explained his plan, not just because she wanted to support him but because the idea of taking down two egotistical opportunists thrilled her. Together, they created the framework for a fake charity organization, branding it as a high-profile initiative backed by influential business leaders. The charity would focus on an impressive but vague cause: something like exclusive educational opportunities for underprivileged children. They crafted a polished website, complete with glowing endorsements from supporters, all fabricated but convincingly presented. The next step was planting the bait. Through intermediaries, Adam ensured that Lisa and Ryan heard about the charity. A few subtle mentions at social gatherings, carefully placed rumors, and an invitation to a small preliminary meeting were all it took. Lisa's need for validation and Ryan's ambition made them perfect targets. They couldn't resist the allure of being associated with something that promised prestige and potential wealth. Lisa was the first to show interest. She asked Adam casually, too casually, if he'd ever heard of the organization. Adam feigned ignorance, playing his part perfectly. Watching her excitement grow as she talked about the opportunity, he could almost see her greed bubbling to the surface. Ryan followed shortly after, expressing interest to the charity's supposed intermediaries. He boasted about his networking skills and ability to attract donors, positioning himself as someone indispensable to the cause. Adam, through Sophie, made sure Ryan was given a prominent role, further inflating his ego and drawing him deeper into the trap. The initial stages went smoothly. Lisa and Ryan were soon attending strategy meetings and rubbing elbows with the fake board of directors, actors Sophie hired to play their parts. They were convinced they were on the verge of something big, their enthusiasm growing with each passing day. Adam watched from the shadows, carefully monitoring their every move. He noted how they began bragging about their new roles to mutual friends and on social media, painting themselves as philanthropic visionaries. The more they invested in the charity, the more vulnerable they became. Adam didn't push them too hard. He let their own ambition lead the way. By the time Lisa and Ryan started contributing financially to the cause, believing it would yield long-term returns, their downfall was inevitable. Every decision they made, every dollar they spent, brought them closer to the edge. Adam couldn't help but feel a grim satisfaction. They had betrayed him without a second thought, assuming he would crumble. Instead, he was slowly, methodically building the stage for their public humiliation. Lisa and Ryan were blind to the truth. They thought they were climbing to new heights, but Adam knew the higher they went, the harder they would fall. And he was going to enjoy every second of it. Lisa and Ryan were falling deeper into Adam's trap, their greed and vanity steering them toward disaster. The fake charity became their obsession. Every meeting, every conversation, every carefully placed suggestion from Adam's intermediaries added another layer to their involvement. They began pouring time, money, and resources into the organization, convinced it was their ticket to prestige and wealth. Lisa, in particular, was thriving in her new role. She saw herself as a rising socialite, attending faux strategy sessions where she rubbed shoulders with the elite. She bragged to her friends about her important connections and how she was finally making a name for herself outside her marriage. To Adam, it was sickening but also strangely satisfying to watch her weave her web of lies, oblivious to the one tightening around her. Ryan, on the other hand, took a different angle. He saw the charity as a business opportunity, pitching ideas for partnerships and investments that could supposedly yield lucrative returns. Through Sophie's carefully scripted team, Ryan was given just enough encouragement to believe he was indispensable. Adam smiled grimly at how easy it was to manipulate his former best friend. Ryan's inflated ego made him predictable, and that predictability was Adam's greatest weapon. Over time, Adam began introducing small, calculated setbacks. These were subtle enough not to raise suspicion but significant enough to create tension between Lisa and Ryan. A potential donor would back out at the last minute, citing concerns about Ryan's lack of professionalism. A high-profile networking event would fall through, leaving Lisa scrambling to maintain her facade of competence. Each failure was a blow to their confidence and credibility, but instead of pulling back, they doubled down, desperate to prove themselves. Adam also planted seeds of doubt between them. Through carefully placed comments and orchestrated misunderstandings, Lisa began to suspect Ryan of holding her back, while Ryan questioned Lisa's loyalty to the project. Their once cozy alliance started to fray under the pressure. Adam watched with cold satisfaction as the cracks in their partnership widened. Meanwhile, Adam continued to collect evidence. He recorded their private meetings, sessions where they shamelessly gloated about their success and mocked those they had fooled. Their arrogance was astonishing, but it was also their undoing. Every word, every sneer, every self-congratulatory comment was another nail in their coffin. By now, Lisa and Ryan were in too deep to back out. They had invested significant amounts of money into the charity, money they couldn't afford to lose. They had also staked their reputations on its success, boasting to everyone about their roles and the impact they were supposedly making. Pulling out would mean admitting failure, and their pride wouldn't allow that. Adam knew the time to strike was approaching. He could see the strain in Lisa's face, the desperation in Ryan's eyes. They were teetering on the edge, and all it would take was one well-placed push to send them plummeting. He wasn't in a rush. The beauty of his plan was in the slow unraveling, the way Lisa and Ryan were destroying themselves without even realizing it. Adam wanted them to feel every moment of their downfall, to understand exactly how and why their lives were falling apart. The stage was set. The pieces were in place. All that remained was the final act. As Lisa and Ryan poured more of themselves into the fake charity, Adam prepared to deliver the final blows. They were already stretched thin, emotionally, financially, and socially. Their confidence was shaken, their partnership strained, but they still clung to the belief that success was just within reach. That was the brilliance of the plan. Every step felt like progress to them, even as it pushed them closer to ruin. Adam had been patient, but now it was time to tighten the noose. He began orchestrating larger, more impactful setbacks. Through Sophie and their team of actors, Adam staged a critical donor meeting that ended in catastrophe. The donor, a seasoned performer with an air of self-importance, subtly questioned Ryan's qualifications in front of Lisa and a small audience. His tone was polite but dismissive, enough to leave Ryan floundering and humiliated. Lisa, embarrassed by the spectacle, later vented to Sophie, unknowingly feeding Adam's plan. Not long after, a supposed high-profile partnership fell through, another carefully orchestrated failure. This time, the blame was placed squarely on Lisa's lack of follow-through, a narrative that Adam fed through his intermediaries. The growing tension between Lisa and Ryan became palpable. They started snapping at each other during meetings, their frustrations spilling into every interaction. Meanwhile, Adam leaked rumors to mutual acquaintances about the charity's legitimacy. These whispers were subtle, just enough to plant doubt in the minds of those around Lisa and Ryan. Former friends began keeping their distance, wary of being associated with something that might be tarnished. Lisa, who thrived on social validation, was devastated by the sudden coldness from her circle. Ryan, ever the opportunist, started focusing more on his own interests, leaving Lisa to shoulder more responsibility for the charity's failures. What neither of them realized was how meticulously Adam was documenting everything. He had recordings of their private conversations, emails detailing their decisions, and even photos of them attending lavish dinners supposedly on behalf of the charity. Every detail was another piece of evidence, another thread in the web that Adam was weaving around them. The most damning evidence came during a meeting Adam staged to test how far their arrogance would go. He had Sophie arrange for a secret discussion about funneling charity funds into personal accounts, a trap they both walked into without hesitation. Their eagerness to exploit the charity for personal gain was sickening, but it was exactly what Adam needed. By now, Adam had everything. Proof of their betrayal, their greed, their lies. All that remained was the perfect moment to reveal it. The charity's gala, a grand event they had been planning for months, was fast approaching. It would be their crowning achievement, the culmination of all their efforts. For Lisa and Ryan, it was a chance to solidify their newfound status. For Adam, it was the stage for their ultimate humiliation. In the weeks leading up to the gala, Adam tightened the screws even further. He had Sophie subtly delay payments to vendors, causing last-minute chaos. The event planning team started dropping out, citing lack of professionalism. Lisa and Ryan scrambled to keep things together, but the cracks were showing. The pressure was mounting, and Adam relished every moment of it. They were blind to the trap closing around them, too consumed by their own ambitions to see the danger. Adam watched as they stumbled forward, oblivious to the fact that their every move was leading them closer to destruction. By the time the gala arrived, they would have nowhere left to hide. The night of the charity gala arrived, glittering with the promise of prestige and accomplishment, at least for Lisa and Ryan. They had spared no expense in making it a grand event. The venue was a lavish ballroom, decorated with an air of sophistication and importance. Guests mingled in designer gowns and tailored suits, sipping champagne as they waited for the evening's highlights. Lisa and Ryan basked in the attention, confident that they had finally secured their place among the elite. Adam watched it all unfold from a quiet corner of the room. He had no interest in mingling with the crowd or congratulating Lisa and Ryan on their so-called success. Tonight wasn't about blending in, it was about waiting for the perfect moment to strike. As the evening progressed, Lisa and Ryan took the stage, their speeches polished and dripping with self-congratulation. They spoke of the charity's noble mission, the challenges they had overcome, and their vision for the future. The audience applauded enthusiastically, unaware that every word was a lie. Adam's heart raced as he reached into his jacket pocket and retrieved a small remote. On cue, Sophie signaled the event's AV technician, who dimmed the lights and prepared the projector. The room fell silent, the applause fading as everyone's attention shifted to the screen at the front of the ballroom. What started as a montage of generic charity footage, A calculated move to lull the audience into complacency, abruptly shifted. Images of Lisa and Ryan at private dinners, accompanied by captions detailing the misuse of charity funds, flashed on the screen. Next came the recordings, Ryan's voice bragging about his plans to siphon money for himself, Lisa mocking donors for being gullible. The crowd began to murmur in confusion and disbelief. The final blow came when the recording of the secret meeting played. The audio was crystal clear, capturing Lisa and Ryan agreeing to funnel funds into personal accounts. Gasps erupted from the audience, followed by hushed whispers. Guests exchanged shocked glances, some pulling out their phones to document the unfolding scandal. Lisa and Ryan stood frozen on the stage, their faces pale under the harsh spotlight. Ryan tried to stammer an explanation, but the crowd wasn't interested. The betrayal was laid bare, and no amount of denial could undo the damage. Adam remained seated, a faint smile playing on his lips. He didn't need to stand or confront them. The evidence spoke for itself, louder and clearer than any accusation he could have made. As the footage ended, the room erupted into chaos. Journalists in the crowd began firing questions, while high-profile guests hurriedly excused themselves, desperate to distance themselves from the disgrace. The applause that had greeted Lisa and Ryan just moments earlier was replaced by condemnation and outrage. Security stepped in to manage the situation, but the damage was already done. By the time the lights came back up, Lisa and Ryan were nowhere to be seen. They had slipped away, humiliated and defeated, but there was no escaping the fallout. Adam quietly left the venue, blending into the night. He didn't need to see what would come next. The lawsuits, the investigations, the complete unraveling of their lives. That part would take care of itself. Tonight was about closure, about reclaiming the power they had stolen from him. And as Adam walked away, he felt a sense of calm he hadn't felt in months. For the first time since the betrayal, he was no longer consumed by anger or pain. The chapter was closed, and Lisa and Ryan would spend the rest of their lives living with the consequences of their choices. The morning after the gala, the fallout was immediate and brutal. News of the scandal spread like wildfire, fueled by videos and photos from the event. Social media exploded with hashtags and posts condemning Lisa and Ryan. Their once pristine reputations were now irreparably tarnished, and the charity they had championed was exposed as a fraudulent scheme. Adam had made sure of that. For Lisa, the humiliation was unbearable. The friends she had bragged to about her philanthropic success now avoided her entirely. Her phone, once constantly buzzing with invitations and compliments, was silent. When she did receive calls, they were from reporters seeking statements or creditors demanding answers. Lisa had always thrived on the approval of others, and the sudden social exile hit her harder than she could have anticipated. Ryan fared no better. The recordings from the gala had not only destroyed his credibility but also painted him as an arrogant opportunist. The business opportunities he had chased so relentlessly dried up overnight. Investors pulled out of deals, citing reputational concerns, and clients stopped returning his calls. Ryan's bravado crumbled under the weight of financial ruin and public disgrace. Both Lisa and Ryan faced mounting legal troubles as well. Authorities opened investigations into the mismanagement of the charity's funds, and several donors filed lawsuits for fraud. Adam had made sure to leak just enough evidence to ensure the authorities had a clear trail to follow. What little support Lisa and Ryan might have had vanished as the legal battles intensified. Their mutual allies turned on them, eager to distance themselves from the scandal. Even their partnership began to crack under the pressure. They blamed each other for their downfall, their once cozy alliance now a bitter rivalry. Adam, meanwhile, watched from the sidelines. He had no interest in gloating or rubbing salt in their wounds. Their self-destruction was more satisfying than any confrontation could have been. They had dug their own graves. All he had done was hand them the tools. But Adam wasn't done. The funds Lisa and Ryan had poured into the fake charity hadn't vanished into thin air. With Sophie's help, Adam redirected the money to real charitable causes, ensuring it was used for the purposes they had falsely claimed to support. Sophie and Emma, the names now associated with the new organization, received widespread praise for their work, further cementing Adam's victory. Lisa and Ryan, on the other hand, were left with nothing. Their financial assets were seized or depleted, their social circles evaporated, and their reputations permanently ruined. They had gambled everything on their greed and arrogance, and they had lost. Adam didn't feel pity for them. They had betrayed him without a second thought, taking advantage of his trust and kindness. Now, they were facing the consequences of their actions, consequences they had brought upon themselves. For Adam, the collapse wasn't just about revenge, it was about reclaiming his life. With Lisa and Ryan out of the picture, he could finally move forward. The weight of their betrayal no longer hung over him. The anger, the pain, the bitterness, they were gone, replaced by a quiet sense of satisfaction. As Adam looked ahead to the future, he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't the same person he had been before the betrayal. He was stronger, smarter, and more resilient. And he would never let anyone take advantage of him again. In the weeks following Lisa and Ryan's collapse, Adam felt a sense of clarity that had eluded him for months. The chaos, the anger, and the heartbreak had given way to something unexpected. Peace. With the burden of their betrayal lifted, he turned his attention to rebuilding his life, not out of spite, but for himself. The charity funds, now safely redirected to legitimate causes, became a source of pride for Adam and Sophie. They watched as real change was made with the money Lisa and Ryan had so selfishly funneled into their schemes. Schools were funded, scholarships awarded, and communities benefited. The good that came from their greed felt like poetic justice, a lasting legacy that had nothing to do with Lisa and Ryan's empty ambitions. Sophie, who had been instrumental in Adam's plan, became more than just an ally. Her unwavering support and shared determination brought them closer. At first, their bond was built on friendship and trust, but over time, it deepened. Sophie was nothing like Lisa. She was grounded, compassionate, and honest. She reminded Adam of the value of genuine connection, something he had almost forgotten. As Adam focused on his future, he began repairing relationships that had been strained by the betrayal. Emma, a close friend who had seen him through the worst of it, became a pillar of support. With her encouragement, Adam started reconnecting with other friends he had distanced himself from during his marriage. Slowly but surely, he began to rebuild his community, surrounding himself with people who truly cared for him. Professionally, Adam found a renewed sense of purpose. The time and energy he had once devoted to his marriage and friendships with Lisa and Ryan were now directed toward his career and personal growth. Opportunities seemed to open up as his focus sharpened. His reputation for integrity and resilience preceded him, earning him respect in his field. Meanwhile, Lisa and Ryan's lives continued to unravel. Adam didn't follow their downfall closely. He didn't need to. From what he heard, Lisa had moved back in with her parents, her once glamorous lifestyle reduced to nothing. Ryan had tried to salvage his reputation, but his name had become synonymous with greed and failure. They were no longer a part of Adam's world, and he was content to leave them behind. For the first time in months, Adam felt like he was living for himself. He wasn't trying to prove anything or hold anyone accountable. His actions had spoken for him, and the results were clear. He had taken control of his narrative, turning his pain into strength and his betrayal into an opportunity to start over. One evening, as Adam sat with Sophie on her porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon, he realized how far he had come. The man who had been broken by Lisa and Ryan's betrayal was gone. In his place was someone stronger, wiser, and ready to embrace the next chapter of his life. "You did it," Sophie said, breaking the comfortable silence. "You took your life back." Adam smiled, the weight of everything finally lifting. "No," he replied, his voice steady. "We did it." As the stars began to dot the sky, Adam felt something he hadn't in a long time. Hope. Not just for himself, but for the life he could build with the people who truly mattered. His revenge was complete, but more importantly, so was his redemption. With the dust of revenge and redemption settling, Adam found himself on a new path. His world, once dominated by betrayal and anger, now revolved around healing and growth. Moving forward wasn't just about leaving Lisa and Ryan behind, it was about rediscovering what truly mattered. Adam took small but meaningful steps toward building a life that felt authentic. He focused on strengthening his relationships with people who had stood by him, like Emma and Sophie. Their friendship had been a lifeline during the darkest times, and now it blossomed into something deeper. Sophie's presence became a source of stability and joy, her kindness and honesty reminding Adam of the type of love he deserved. Work also became a cornerstone of Adam's new life. He threw himself into projects that challenged him, pouring his energy into meaningful endeavors. With his focus and dedication, he quickly gained recognition as someone who could be trusted, a far cry from the chaos Lisa and Ryan had left in their wake. Opportunities seemed to find him effortlessly now, as if the universe were rewarding him for persevering. Adam also spent time reflecting on himself, confronting the parts of his past he had avoided for too long. Therapy sessions helped him process not only the betrayal but the patterns that had led to it. He came to terms with how he had overlooked red flags, how he had sacrificed his own needs for the sake of keeping peace. It wasn't about blaming himself but learning how to set boundaries and prioritize his own happiness moving forward. The life Adam rebuilt was far from perfect, but it was his. There were days when memories of Lisa and Ryan would creep in, moments when anger or sadness threatened to resurface. But those feelings no longer consumed him. Instead, they served as reminders of how far he had come, markers of a chapter that was finally behind him. Meanwhile, Lisa and Ryan were shadows of their former selves. Word reached Adam now and then. Lisa's failed attempts to rebuild her social life, Ryan's struggles to find steady work, but he didn't dwell on their misfortunes. They had chosen their paths, and their downfall was no longer his concern. One evening, as Adam stood on the balcony of his new apartment, a glass of wine in hand, he reflected on the journey that had brought him here. The skyline shimmered before him, alive with possibilities. Beside him, Sophie leaned against the railing, her warmth a quiet reassurance. This is it, he thought. This is what moving on feels like. Lisa and Ryan's betrayal no longer defined him. The revenge, while satisfying, was merely a stepping stone to something greater. Adam's life wasn't about what he had lost, it was about what he had gained. Self-respect, clarity, and the strength to carve out a future on his own terms. As the city lights twinkled in the distance, Adam smiled. His story wasn't about revenge or even redemption. It was about moving forward, about learning to let go of what no longer served him and embracing the life that lay ahead. For the first time in what felt like forever, Adam was truly at peace. The journey was over, but the future had just begun.